Your bubble really is that company. If you're in tech, you have a giant walled garden around you. There's a lot of limitations in your ability to learn and understand like what the wider universe looks like, because they have a very specific way they do everything. And so connecting with developers that are either at your level or above or even below your level, but coming at it from a different perspective in a local environment, it's really, really positive thing. It also gives you a lot of confidence. You want to just go, hey, let's go find the interesting people in my local market, in my local town that care about the same things I care about. There's just a ton of value there. Here we go. One more time. We missed last week. A bunch of us were sick and traveling and different things like that. Our first missed week, but we're 20 plus episodes in, so we feel we earned one. So that's okay. I hope you guys forgive us. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is kind of a nuts and bolts topic for engineering leadership. And it's something that everybody has to kind of have a posture and have a policy. And there's a lot of different variables. And we thought we'd just have a conversation about, sort of how we see it across different organizations and things like that. And that's conferences. How do we handle it? What's the budget? What's the policy? Is it structured? Is it not structured? Are there requirements? Is there proposals? Like all that stuff. And how do you want to sort of make those decisions and determinations for yourselves as an engineering group? So I don't know, it could be fun. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been asked the question a lot in my positions, like, can I go to this conference? Can I go to that conference? Should we go? Should we have some appearances at this show, that show? And it's not exactly an easy thing to answer all the time because there's so many conferences out there. And if you go to all of them, you're going to have some repeats. You're going to have some overlaps. You're going to blow a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, so, and we should clarify, right? Like this is going to a conference as an attendee, specifically coming from the engineering technology organizations, right? This is not going and presenting at a conference. It's in scope for this conversation. It's not about like any sort of sales and marketing or business development or anything like that. That is just a totally different calculation and a totally different thing. I just want to make sure we're clear. I mean, there's some overlap there when you start getting into, hey, should engineering leaders and senior engineers and stuff like that do a lot of talks as a way to help sort of promote that company and that brand and things like that. But even still, I think that is a different thing, but we can talk about that a little bit as it relates to the individual engineer and actually how you put policy around that as well, because different companies have different policies essentially for public speaking of any kind. And you have to make sure you're conscious of that so that you don't run afoul of the policies and the HR types and the legal types and stuff like that. So getting into it, like just diving in, right? Let's break it down. Where I'd like to start is like, what's the why? Like, what are the good reasons to go to a conference?
Most developers will look at a conference and say, hey, I want to go to learn something. I want to go to this React conference. And maybe I can learn something new, like a how-to or an article, or maybe find a new novel way of building our apps. I think that's typically what a developer would look at and say, hey, I think there could be something useful for me to learn here. Or if it's an SRE conference, I want to learn more about this product. I want to see what's new and shiny in the industry or in this topic or this tool. I think that's typically where developer will start looking at it and say, hey, maybe there's something useful here that I can bring back and share with the rest of the team. That's the motivation for it. Now, where it breaks down a little bit along those ways, and I think we'll touch into that, but at least developers have a good reason to go. I want to learn something. I want to try something new. I don't see it as often as I want to get out of working for a day. There might be some motivation for that for some people here and there. And I think there's actually a good spot for that to let somebody go and blow off some steam. But typically it's a motivation of, I want to learn something new. And hey, boss, can I go and can you pay for me to go to this so I can learn something new and share it with everybody? That's at least where I've been asked before of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing. I have mixed feelings about that, right? Like on the one hand, people are like, oh, I want to go sit in this conference session and learn this workshop, this activation, and learn how to do X, right? Like there's going to be some workshop at, some React conference that's going to teach you, how to use memoization and like, oh, I want to go do that. Like to me, I kind of roll my eyes at that a little bit. Like,
because that's a YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like talk to your bot or talk to YouTube or, whatever, like be self-driven. But I think you bring up a really good point, right? There is something powerful about being in the mix and being around all these ideas that are floating around, people pushing new ideas, pushing their product. Like honestly, like just expose myself. Like the last probably 5 or 6 conferences I've been to, and I go to conferences for all kinds of reasons, not just technical. I didn't go into a single session that either I or someone that I didn't know was speaking at. I float around, and I float around the convention floor, usually the expo, maybe some of the other things, like being around and and it sounds silly, but like the vibes and understanding what people are pitching and what people are selling and what are some of the ideas that are being put forward. To me, like that's from my seat, which is very different than what we're talking about. That's what I think is interesting and useful. And I do think that there's something to that for the individual developers too. Like you mentioned the SRE thing. When we were at one of the banks, our relationship with a pretty important product for the future of the architecture there started at reInvent, right? Like we were walking around, we're like, yeah, what are the problems we got to solve? Blah, blah, blah. We had a product we were reasonably okay and happy with, but we knew it wasn't really what we wanted for the future because they had been acquired and the people that acquired it were kind of letting it die on the vine. And so I'm there with a couple of, smart devs, and we start talking to this other provider, right? And it's like, oh, this is interesting. And you're open to it too, right? Like there's an interesting thing about that. When you're in that type of environment, you're much more open to new ideas as opposed to like some sales guy calls you, you're much less likely to engage, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing because you have to be open to having those conversations with somebody in the industry, or at least be seeking them out and starting to talk to the vendor, starting to talk to other people and work your way in. It's more of a networking than just pure going to learn from sessions, because you can go to the session from their website and say like, okay, what are they talking about here? I'm going to go Google these things and go watch some YouTube videos, get pretty much the same content. Or typically they'll post the session slide decks afterwards. But what you're saying is a kind of like a level 2 of that, where you go and start talking to individuals and you learn about more detailed industry topics that they're going to be more concentrated tidbits than, a session is typically going to have a little bit of fluff in there that talk about who they are, what their company is, what they do. And then you might have a few good topics to learn from, but then afterwards it's like, okay, well, what did I learn? I have no idea. But you're talking to somebody and you remember them. A lot of those people are going to be more memorable because they're more genuine they're passionate about something. They want to talk about something. They want to tell you what they learned. They want to tell you something cool that they've been working on. Even if you have no interest in buying their product, they typically are going to have more passion to talk about a detail than you would from a session speaker. And I'm kind of selling myself out a little bit there too, because I've spoken at different conferences, and I can say that like you've got to add something in there as just filler to engage the audience, because if you don't have an engaged audience, then people aren't going to want to listen to you anymore. But when it's a more genuine one-on-one conversation, you're talking on the show floor, you talk to a vendor, you talk to somebody at a happy hour, you're going to get the unfiltered, like, hey, this is something cool that we did recently. To your point of not going to many sessions and going to network, I find a ton of value just finding people, talking to them. Hey, what's up? What are you working on? Like, who are you? And what's something cool you did? So much more valuable than anything else in those sessions.
Yeah, and again, we're bringing more senior personas to it, but 100%. Like when we present it either from a stage or from an expo booth or something like that. And yeah, it's an opportunity to have a human conversation in a relationship that is too often dehumanizing. You're cold emailing somebody, or you're putting somebody in a marketing flow or a funnel, or that you're messaging on LinkedIn or whatever it is, right? And that's just not as much as, hey, we're going to have a human conversation here. And there's a lot of opportunity. And the cool thing is like we're a software vendor, right? So we're selling at some of these conferences. As someone who's also been on the other side of that, it's actually kind of nice to have a place where it's almost like speed dating, right? Like it's like I know I'm gonna go into this situation. I've never done the speed dating thing, just seen it on like movies, but hopefully this is relatively correct. But like I'm gonna go into this environment and I'm prepared for it to be the way it is, and maybe something interesting happens. Maybe something interesting happens as a result of those conversations. They keep coming back to that because they're getting value from it, right? You and I are both advocates of like, go learn. Like the information's out there in the web, go figure it out. You've got the bots now, talk to the bots. Like you can learn anything you want to learn. And that is true 100%. But it is good to get in a situation where you're in the physical community, right? Or whatever that is, right? It could be, we're talking specifically around tech. It could be around a library. It could be around an operating system. It could be around a vendor, whatever it is. It could be something as big and bold as like a reInvent or Google I/O or whatever. There's massive conferences that are kind of like ecosystem conferences, or it could be down to like your little niche meetup in Charlotte or, Raleigh or Nashville or wherever you are. Being in that, connecting with the community, in person, there's something powerful to that. And I think that there is a lot of benefit to people doing that. And I think I'm interrupting myself with another point. Like we don't have to always just focus on the big expensive conferences that require a lot of travel and, multi-$1,000 tickets either.
Some of those niche events are great. Yeah, like you just go to the conference center. There's a few in Charlotte that I've been to that have been very, very good, and gives you an opportunity to see and meet others in your local industry versus your national industry of people who are
Yeah.
working on something cool down the street, and you find out what's working for you and what's not. And yeah, you can go search the web for how to do React hooks or how to build an API or whatever it is. But if you talk to somebody who's found something that isn't on your search list, you wouldn't have even known to search for it because you don't know that's a thing. That's where I found a lot of value in just those individuals who are saying, "Hey, look, don't do that. This is terrible. Just go and use this tool instead." And it's like, "Oh, cool. That's
Yeah. I mean,
and it blows your mind. It's like, why didn't I think of that?"
yeah. I mean, that's why you got to diversify your conversations, right? Like, this is one of the challenges with small teams, especially if you don't have some fresh ideas. Sometimes people get a little too siloed in their thinking, and so it's good to go and have those conversations. I mean, the local stuff. I mean, we were for a little while sponsoring a local meetup. The meetup kind of hasn't really reemerged post COVID, but maybe that's a call to action. Maybe some of us need to start doing that. But there's a lot of benefit there, especially as you're early in your career, because this is what happened to me, right? Like when I got into tech and I started working at one of the banks, I was there for a number of years. And the problem is your bubble is that company, right? Especially at a place like the bank. Your bubble really is that company. If you're in tech, like you have a giant walled garden around you, right? And so there's a lot of limitations in your ability to learn and understand like what the wider universe looks like, because they have a very specific way they do everything. And so going to some of those things and connecting with developers that are either at your level or above or even below your level, but coming at it from a different perspective in a local environment, it's really, really positive thing. It also gives you a lot of confidence. And, maybe if you want to look for your next job, you've now got a relationship with someone you could talk to and say, hey, like, what do you think? There's different perspectives. And there's a lot of, I mean, you don't want to go into it with, oh, I'm looking for my next job. And so I'm going to go meet a bunch of people. If you're at a position where you're kind of in that sort of urgency there, that's not ideal. You've waited too long, but I mean, still do it, I suppose. But you want to just go, hey, let's go find the interesting people in my local market, in my local town that care about the same things I care about. There's just a ton of value there.
Yeah, and the inverse works too. If you're in a small company or in a small startup and you haven't worked in a large bank or a large enterprise, then you're not going to learn about more advanced tools than what you have and available to it as a small company. So you're going and learning how to take you from where you are in your current level and go further into what is more popular used at an enterprise. There's a lot there, even if you can't use it, just knowing that how to scale from 1 to 3, there's a lot that you could just take from and maybe even make yourselves 10% more efficient.
Well, hey, before you, on that point, that's an awesome point. Like everyone is interested in the other, right? Like when I was at Bank of America, we were obsessed with what startups were doing. Like we really wanted to know what startups were doing because like they're doing the cool stuff. And then we go talk to startups and like, oh my God, you guys are operating at such scale, right? Like everything's interesting from someone else's perspective, potentially.
So you go to these conferences, but I think where I've seen it broken down is the afterwards, the write-up, or you invest in this individual to go to this conference. You say, okay, cool. Now, when you get back, can you just write it up? And so that we can share your learnings from what you've picked up there. Cause that's really what you want. You want that person to go be the person who goes and learns everything, brings it back and shares with the team and everybody knows learning.
Scout.
But I don't see that working too well. Typically they go like, yeah, it was great. And cool. What'd you learn? Oh, I learned a bunch of stuff. And then it just dies.
It's hard to articulate. I mean, it really is. And I think your point, like if you want to be super formal about that, that's tough to do. It's going to have to be somebody that's super intentional and super good kind of like documenting what's going on. I mean, it's okay to do that, obviously, like, cause you don't want to just not have any outcome from spending probably thousands of dollars, right? Not to mention lost time, because generally speaking, you don't want to make people use PTO and things like that for conferences. But yeah, to your point, it's not necessarily a ton of value. But then again, I've seen people do some good stuff too. Like it also depends on what it is, right? Like I remember when we were making the React Native transition somewhere, a couple of the key engineers went to the big React conference because they really wanted to sort of talk to people in the industry about specifically this kind of strategic transition we were making. And they came back with kind of an internal talk of like, here's all what we learned and stuff. But that was a very intentional, we have this problem we're tackling. We're going to this place where there's a lot of
it's everybody's problem. Like everybody's well-versed that this is a problem that we all need to solve. So, in that case, you had to be intentional about bringing things back.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the best. Like those are the easiest business cases to make, right? Like is is that type of thing. It's like, hey, we're trying to solve this specific problem. We're going where the experts are. We're going to come back with the knowledge. But, you think about things like I mentioned reInvent. reInvent's the one that's most on my radar, right? It's cool. It's cool to be at reInvent and hear the announcements. Like, whatever.
All the
like I said,
videos are online afterwards. It's
all the videos
online.
are online. It's all on Twitter. It's all like whatever. You don't get a lot there, but there's an energy to it. There's a vibe to it that is actually quite interesting. And again, I use those events mainly to reconnect with either vendors or customers. I use that for that purpose. But I mean, I think that it's a perk. I think there is a degree to which it's just fun, right? And I think that's okay for companies to pay for that. And it's like, hey, this is it's a perk. It's something that's there. It's mostly going to benefit the individual. It's not going to benefit the company.
How do you pick though? Because that's the thing how do you pick the people to go if you have a team of 20 people or a few teams of 20 people, you have a budget for one or two. How do you pick?
Well, this is why smaller companies tend to do better in this area because it's like, if let's say it takes $5,000 to go to reInvent, right? I don't know what the exact numbers are. The tickets are crazy, the flights and airlines and all those different things, right? So it's $5,000 a person. Well, if you've got 10 people you want to send, it's $50,000 or 100, you've got 200 developers in the organization. That's a massive number now. What are you going to do? And how do you figure that out? Like this is why big corporations end up sending senior people. Like I could go almost any time I wanted to go, but I couldn't necessarily get my guys to go because the budget wasn't necessarily there for them. Because to your point, well, if I let this one senior engineer go, why can't all the other senior engineers go? And this is what happens in big companies. Basically, nobody gets to do anything because if I let the one person, then I have to let everybody because of fairness or whatever. And I mean, there's a point there at the same time, like that we would turn it into, to your point, a reward of some kind, right? So you pick
tenure, somebody who's been here a long time.
Tenure, or maybe it's part of a retention strategy. Like we want this person to feel valued. Maybe they're a star, whatever. There's things like that go into that. And, maybe that's not fair, but okay.
None of this is fair, really. Like there's at some point you've got to take out like, this is not a fair thing. It's a big undertaking. You might have one person to go to. And at some level, it's not going to be fair to anybody else if one person gets to go. But that's just the reality of it, is that sometimes it's just not fair.
Yeah, I mean, we get into a whole philosophical conversation on how people define fair and all these different things. I mean, ultimately, I think you have to do what's best. Like as an engineering leader, you're going to say, okay, ultimately, what budget do I have? Right. So what budget do I want to allocate? What I think most people end up doing, at least what I've seen, is they don't really allocate any budget to it. Or if they do, it's kind of in this sort of slush fund area of miscellaneous that they can pull from. And then they essentially make you come to them and convince the leader that there's actual value there. And I'm going to let you spend it on that. That's not a terrible way to do things. It's not very systematic. And what it ends up doing is very much favoring the more senior people and the people that can kind of tell a story about what's important, right? Like I used the reInvent example. Like I could always get budget to go to reInvent because I could talk to the person who had this purse strings and get it done. But people beneath me or maybe other peers of mine weren't able to do that. You're kind of making some decisions indirectly that filter certain things out. That's maybe good, maybe not. But I also really like sort of the flip side, right? Like, I mean, we talk about the 37 Signals guys or Basecamp. They're a fully remote organization, but they encourage conferences, I believe. And they certainly have their meetups where they will fly everybody in. I mean, I think there's something to that as well. Your location strategy should feed into your conference strategy, I think. It's like if you're a startup that's fully, or a tech company that's fully in person in like San Francisco, like spending a bunch of money on conferences might be a little silly because you're around this wild ecosystem all over.
There's going to be local meetups, a lot of local meetups for the same thing.
Yeah. You don't need it. And a lot of the conferences are right there too. You just walk in, right? And so that's one thing. But if you're like some startup in Peoria, Illinois, or some small company in Peoria, Illinois, that's fully in person, like, yeah, I mean, maybe you should, because you're kind of out on an island a little bit, right? Not to pick on Peoria, but maybe there's more intentional investment to go and like connect to the hubs and bring some more context back. So that's kind of how I think about it. I personally would struggle to like say, okay, hey, we're going to allocate upfront $50,000 or whatever the number is, to conferences generically. Like I personally would kind of want to approve them on a case-by-case basis, both for the person and for the conference. Obviously, that doesn't scale. I would be slightly uncomfortable just saying, yes, the money is here. Here's $5,000 a year that each person has or $2,000 a year or whatever it is you can then go now and spend on conference and travel related to it, and you just need to expense it properly and da da da. Like that's a
That's a little bit squishy.
I'm not really ready for like conceptually.
Because you still want some sort of ROI on that. It's just if it's a generic, hey, you've got this money to spend on anything, hey, you still want some sort of ROI, and it's not just a slush fund for somebody to just spend on some arbitrary travel for a little conference that it's just whatever. So the reality is that it's an investment in the individual. You still need to have something back from this. Either they've advanced their skills, they've met some contacts, they've found a new cool vendor to work on that's going to help the company move forward. So this is still an investment in the person, the team, and the rest of the company to improve out of it. Either it could end up in better retention. It could end up in better knowledge. There's a lot of outcomes, but you still have to identify what are you targeting with this? What are your goals as a leader in the space of saying, well, if I'm going to put some money towards this, I still need to see something back in one way, shape, or form. Is it trying to get somebody who's a possible flight risk to re-engage? Is it to your scenario of React Native? Hey, we're going through a transition with React Native, so we're going to send some people there and bring the knowledge back and share with everybody else so we can get better. What are the goals here? Your team has to know too, so that they know what is even okay to bring up to you, or that it is okay to bring up to you. If there's no money for it, there's no targets for it, people are going to just spin their wheels and submit requests to you for conferences that are going to be a no all the time. But you'd rather have your team know that, hey, it's okay to submit or it's not okay to submit. But it's all comes back to your goals. And first off, do you have the money for it? But do you have a plan for the outcomes?
Yeah. No, I think that's good. It's true of everything, right? Like make sure you're being intentional about all that. Set expectations with the team. If you're an individual engineer, what I would say is you could probably almost always get time off to go to these things. Like I used to know a guy that would take time off. I think he would use his PTO, or maybe he would just get somebody to let him go. I think to cover travel or the ticket. He would get the vendors to pay for something. Like he would get somebody to comp him a ticket, and then he'd pay for the travel himself or something like that. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending you do that, but like you said, there's local things you can do. There's all kinds of stuff if you really want to get connected in the community, which I do recommend. It was really useful to me at times for that in-person thing. There's lots of ways to do it, but yeah, look to your local stuff too.
There's nothing wrong with it. Some of them there's some hidden gems in each local market. Just got to look.
Participate. Go give a talk at those things. I recommend that for everybody. Not everybody's going to go give a talk at reInvent. That's fine. I did one at an AWS summit. It was pretty brutal. But not everybody's going to be that level of public speaker. But every engineer should be able to give a talk at a local meetup where it's a bunch of people in a cafeteria with some pizza. That should be something you guys should all aspire to. If that's terrifying, then even more so you should be doing that. It's a great way to get to connect people with people, and it will make you better as an engineer, as a communicator, all those things. So I would really push there, especially if you're in a situation like there's a lot going on of uncertainty in the market these days, lots of news about layoffs, all these different things. Like if you're in those environments where people are like, no, are you kidding? Like we don't have money for that. Okay, cool. Focus on the stuff that doesn't cost anything, but you get a lot of the same benefit.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear about others who might be listening or watching to let us know how they handle these things. How have you handled it in the past? Is there something that we're missing that we should be thinking about? And maybe we can do a follow up on this. But I'd love to hear how others are handling this in their companies, or even if it just has failed, whatever. I'd like to hear some feedback from those who might be watching.
Yeah, that's a great call. So hello@devgrid.io. Can hit us on Twitter, YouTube, etc. Let us know your thoughts. And I think that's it for today. All right. Cool. Well, thank you all.
See ya.